Good evening, everybody. And you're all very welcome as we gather for this book launch and this celebration of this lovely piece of work. My name is Brendan Dineen, and I am a member of the staff here in Clonard Monastery. I am a co-worker in youth ministry, and I have been invited by Redemptorist Communications, I suppose, to be the host for this evening. So I was delighted to take up that invitation. And it really is wonderful to be here. I was talking to a colleague yesterday who received the invitation in the post. And he says, wasn't it just great to get something inviting you to an event that wasn't online, that wasn't a Zoom call, and that you could actually come and sit and be in a place and be with people. And it's been a beautiful day here in Belfast, and it's lovely that the sun continues to shine on us this evening, and that we're able to gather for this event. You might remember some years ago, during one of the World Cups, they started this phenomenon of the Mexican wave. Do you remember the Mexican wave? And the whole crowd kind of, well, we're not going to do that. Well, okay. But something that has happened here in Clonard over the last year is how the community who are gathered here up behind have connected with the people out there. For many months of the past year, the church has been closed to the public, but many people have watched in and have participated in the liturgies here in the church. So the community to connect with the people at the end of Mass or the service, they would give the people a wave. And people have really connected with that wave, and it's now become known as the Clonard wave. So we want to say hello to everybody who is online, because not everybody was able to come and join us physically here in the church for the event, but many people are tuning in via the webcam. I want to mention especially Father Brendan McConvey, a member of the community here, but who is currently unwell and not able to join us tonight. It was Father Brendan who invited Jim to write some pieces for the Reality magazine, the magazine of Redemptorist Communications, and came up with the concept of this book and to encourage Jim to do this. So we say hello to Brendan, and if we all the camera is just right at the back of the church, so if you look around, it'll not pick up everybody, but it'll pick up a lot of people, and we all give everybody, and especially Brendan McConvey, a big Clonard wave. And they're all waving back, because that's what people do. And they tell us that they wave back to their computers and their TVs and their phones. So it really is wonderful for us to be here tonight in this beautiful church, in this beautiful city, in this beautiful part of the city. I'm from West Belfast, and I'm very proud to come from West Belfast, as is Jim Deeds and many other people here tonight. And, you often, when you're talking to people from Belfast, they say, which is the best part of Belfast? Well, they'll always tell you which part they're from. So this is the best part of Belfast, and the people here are great. And, to come and to have a book launch, and to celebrate this book launch, and to congratulate Jim on this wonderful and beautiful book. So it kind of symbolizes somebody from this part of the city who has given us something beautiful, rich to enjoy. We have many people in this part of the city who are writers, who are musicians, who are artists, who are proud people, people who are teachers, youth workers, and people who make a wonderful contribution to the life of this city. And I think it's important for us to recognize that. And you don't need me to explain to you why. So tonight is a great occasion. And again, we hope that you feel that you're welcome here. We want you to, as they say, sit back, relax, and enjoy what's going to happen here over the next hour. So we hope that you feel that you're very much welcome. So I'm going to invite Father Peter Burns, who is the rector here in Clonard Monastery, to come and say some words of welcome on behalf of the Redemptorists here in Clonard.
Thank you, Brendan, and good evening, everyone. I'm invited to say these words of welcome on behalf of the Redemptorist community here at Clonard, and I'm absolutely delighted to do that. We have in our mission statement a description of Clonard as a centre of welcome and a centre of outreach. So, on behalf of the community, I want to say this word of welcome. We are altogether 19 Redemptorists living here. Well, not all of us are living here, but 19 of us are assigned to the community here. And then we have one candidate in formation. And 17 of the confreres are currently in residence. So on behalf of the community, and some of them you'll see them on the sanctuary behind me, I want to say a very warm word of welcome to all of you. I think this is the third book launch that we've had in recent years. In 2017, a book written by one of our confreres, Martin McKeever, on Father Al Reid was launched. And then in 2019, the biography of Father Jerry Reynolds, written by Gladys Gagnon, was launched here in Clonard. And now this evening, A Look of Love by Jim. The last launch, as I say, The Unity Pilgrim, was the biography of Father Jerry Reynolds. And it took place just about 18 months ago. But when I think back to that last launch, I'm aware of, how that was really another world. Just 18 months ago, it was still normal. And here we are 18 months later. But if we'd gathered for this evening's launch a month ago, if we'd gathered in the middle of March, we would have had to have it with an empty church. So at least it's a plus that we're able to be here this evening and that I'm able to say a word of welcome to you. When I looked yesterday at the guest list, I realized what a diverse gathering this is. Jim is here with his family, and he's very, very welcome. They're very, very welcome. Paula McKeown is here. There's Paula. Both Jim and Paula, of course, are so closely associated with the Living Church. And that's why we welcome Paula. She's on her own, unfortunately, but she's very, very welcome. And when I looked at that list of guests, I recognized the names of some people who are regulars at Clonard. So they're always here, but they're always welcome, of course. And then there were other names of people who would come to Clonard occasionally. And I'm certain that there are probably people here this evening who haven't ever been here before, that this is their first visit to Clonard. And if you're one of them, you're especially welcome. I saw the names of some priests from the diocese, some ministers and members of other churches, and members of religious congregations. Father Eugene McCarthy's name was on the list. I'm not sure if Eugene is here. Oh, he is. There he is, from Ardoyne. The Redemptorists have been here in Clonard since 1896, about 125 years. But if we've been here that length of time, the Passionists in Ardoyne were there about 30 years before we came here. So they're there a long time. And I always think, that there's some very special kindred spirit between Redemptorists and Passionists. So it's good that Eugene is here, and of course Father Brian Darcy, who's going to launch the book in a few moments. Father Brendan McManus is also here from the Jesuit community in North Belfast, and Brendan and Jim have co-authored a couple of books. So Brendan is also very, very welcome. Bishop Alan Abernethy is over here, and his Bishop Noel Traynor is sitting beside him. I didn't know that he had arrived, but both of them are very, very welcome joining us this evening. I regret, that we're not able to offer any further hospitality this evening, because that's something I think which ought to be an important element on an occasion like this, where we could mingle and have some conversation. But unfortunately, it just isn't possible. So we're not able to offer you any hospitality beyond being here in the church. But Brendan, in his introduction, mentioned another group of people whom I want to welcome specially. It's almost 20 years now since we here in Clonard installed our webcam. I think we were one of the first in the field. But really, it's only in the past 12 months that we've become aware and we've got to appreciate just how important that online congregation is. The number and the range of people who join us for our various liturgical functions here is really very, very significant. I already mentioned that some members of our community are not resident in Clonard, and Brendan mentioned one of them, Father Brendan McConvery. But there are two of them, I think, who are joining us online this evening. Father Sean Keeney is resident in the Railway Lodge care home in Dunmurry, and I hope and pray that, Sean, that you've been able to come online and to join us this evening. And then Brendan McConvery is in Chestnut Grove on the Summerton Road. And as Brendan mentioned, Brendan McConvery, as editor of our magazine Reality, has been a key part of Redemptorist communications in recent years. And Brendan would have wanted, I met him yesterday and spoke with him, and he would have really wanted to be here in the church with us this evening, but he isn't able to be. So I want to welcome very, very specially all of you who are joining us online, and I want to welcome particularly Sean Keeney and Brendan McConvery. So, welcome.
Thank you very much, Father Peter. And in my introduction and getting carried away with bigging up West Belfast, I forgot some things. As you'll see tonight, we have all our safety measures in place. So when you come into the church, your hands would have been sanitized. You're sitting in designated seats. You're wearing face coverings. And that's all very important. And we ask you to please to remain in your seats until the end of the event, and to ensure that your face covering, that you're wearing it throughout the event. And towards the end of the evening, I will give further instructions about how you will leave the church. So we're going to have the next part of our evening, and this is the official launch of the book, and we're delighted that Father Brian Darcy is going to do that for us. Father Brian, a man that many of you will know or be familiar with. He is a native of County Fermanagh. He is a Passionist, and he was ordained in 1969, so he's been a priest for over 50 years. Father Brian is probably best known for his broadcasting, and he hosts a weekly radio show on Radio Ulster, and I got a shout out at it one time. You'll never remember that, but I did a request, so thank you very much. It's been a very popular show, and he also contributes to many other BBC and other broadcasting programmes. And he's also, since 1976, had a column in the Sunday World newspaper entitled Father Brian's A Little Bit of Religion. He's also very well known in the world of show business and entertainment and the music world, and he has many, many friends in that world. And I don't know whether you described it yourself or somebody described you as the kind of unofficial chaplain to the showbiz world, and that's great as well. So we're delighted that you're here with us this evening, Father Brian, and I'm going to invite you to come and speak to us and to officially launch this wonderful and beautiful book, A Look of Love.
Well, good evening, everybody. And nice to see you all. And thanks for all those lovely welcomes. And may I just send my own good wishes to Brendan McConvey, lovely man and a great editor, as I would like to do it too to Jerry Maloney, who's not able to be up this evening either, who's the acting editor at the moment, all good friends of mine for many, many years, and all excellent at their job, really do a wonderful job. There used to be a comedian in Dublin, a fellow called Al Bannon, lovely man he was, and very droll sense of humour, you know, and I went to see him very often in various places, Clontarf Castle and so places that. He used to open for Maureen Potter and things like that. And Al had a very droll sense of humour, and he always said something very simple when he came out every night. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very glad to be here. At my age, I'm very glad to be anywhere." And I think that's just about the height of it for me at all. This evening, it's just great to get out anywhere. And to see real human people before us here in the church. And it's just delighted, and I hope it'll be very safe, and I hope it'll be what's going to happen in the future. We were taking photographs outside earlier on. I don't know what they're going to be used for, but it reminded me, I just thought, as I was taking the photographs and books and so forth, you know, when I think of Dolly Parton, I think of books. I don't know what you think of, but I think of books. Because she's been such a wonderful example of providing tens of millions of books to young people across the world free of charge for many years. But it always reminded me of a time when I've been a fan of Dolly's for 50 years, and a bit more, I suppose. And I was doing an interview with her one time in the Dominion Theatre in London for the said Sound of the World, and Tom McElroy was the photographer. And Tom lined up a beautiful photograph of myself and Dolly Parton, and we're just at the stage in the Dominion Theatre to be on the front page of the Sound of the World the following week with an interview. And Tom got everything lined up, and he said, "Smile, smile, smile." Just as I was about to smile, Dolly says, "Hey, Father, I think you should be looking at the camera." So those of you who know Dolly Parton had to confess that sin afterwards, for I was looking for the wrong way. So we need to be careful where we're looking for. It's great just to be asked to launch a book of this quality. I think it's a brilliant, wonderful book, easily read and quite different from anything that's on the market. It's a really terrific book, and I'm delighted to be able to do something for Jim Deeds, who does so much good work. And I'm delighted, Jim, your dad's a little better this evening. That must have been a big worry for you too. So it's lovely to see that. And I've been looking, Jim has been working very hard and is just doing phenomenal work He really does phenomenal work. It's different, it's insightful, it's brilliant, it's spiritual, and it's beautiful. He is a treasure in the church. There's no question. I'm just delighted to be able to do something to help that, and it's something small. As I am with Brendan McManus here, another from Anaman, and all his family and friends, or family and friends of my own in Fermanagh. And Brendan and Jim do great work. So it's lovely to be able to do all of that. One of the times that the late Gay Byrne used to very frequently tell a lovely story against himself, and it's a true story. Every night before the Late Late, when Gay came out to do the Late Late, usually all the big stars, or any other stars, not so big stars, have a warm-up act. It's usually a comedian who comes out and gets the audience free, and the same as Peter did tonight, Peter Byrne. You know the way he got you all going there, no bother, and name dropped and did everything brilliantly. But Gay used to do it himself, every Late Late show. They'd be all in, ready to go. Gay would come out, he wouldn't have the tie on him, he'd just come out, not fully dressed, and he'd come out and he'd talk to them, and he'd tell them all the usual things, Now, if the camera comes on you, don't be waving to it, don't be sending kisses to your mother down the country, just keep looking at it, and for heaven's sake, look as if you're alive, even though you're not. Stay interested in it, and give her accent, and he'd give all this usual thing, very humorously and very brilliantly. He was doing it one night, and he moved through the audience for this, and just as he was in the middle of it, this lady let out an enormous, elongated yawn. And Gay was just disgusted with this, It's precisely what he was telling them not to do. And he said to her, I'm sorry, darling. I hope I'm not keeping you awake. And to which the lady replied, just about. To which Gay always said, don't take on the audience at any stage, because they'll always get the better of you. And that's what I'm intending to do tonight, just to keep you just about awake. Enough to do two things: to know that there's a book being launched, and to know that you can buy the book, and that you should buy the book, and that it's not for putting the teapot on, it's for reading, and it's for doing something wonderful with, because it is an exceptional book. A book launch has to be about the book and the author of the book. And that's what the centre is tonight. So it is about Jim and Jim's book and what he has done and do it. Personally, though, I'd just like to say a special word of thanks to David McNamara, a Redemptorist whom I don't know, but I know his work, and it is quite superb, both in reality and in this book. It's a beautiful, beautiful book, really beautifully designed book, and David has really surpassed himself in this. One of the things I've learned in all of these years, just all the years writing for the Sunday World and for all of the other things and broadcasts, I've noticed there's a difference. You can write an article and you can do a broadcast and you can do an interview, and it makes an impact, generally speaking, but nothing permanent, or very rarely anything permanent. A book is something entirely different. I've learned that books are permanent, and there's a kind of a will and testament in a book that's not in an article. There's something about a book that's worth reading has something of the person in the book. And that's what makes it entirely different from articles and interviews and things like that. It's just a book is a permanent record of where the author was at a particular time in life. Jim won't be at this point in 10 years' time, or indeed 5 years' time. But he is there now. And that's why we must respect the book and respect the insights and respect the wonderful ability to tell stories that Jim has in this book. He's done really an amazing job for it. I've been reading, just to give you an idea about the power of a book as distinct from the power of an article. I've been reading a few books recently, excuse me, and one of them was a really good biography of Thomas Berry. Now you're saying, who's Thomas Berry? Mary Ellen Tucker has done and written a really top-class readable book about Thomas Berry. And I'm not I'm not really promoting somebody that's a passionist, but Thomas Berry was a passionist. I didn't know him, but I met a lot of people who did know him. And Thomas Berry has become really the father of ecology. He's the spiritual father of ecology. Right across the world, everybody studies and references Thomas Berry. Now, when Thomas Berry started off, and I was able to check this out with good friends, that of his people like Don Senior and before that Barnabas Ahern, the late Barnabas Ahern, and they were shrewd men. Barnabas particularly was a shrewd man. And I used to ask them about Thomas Berry, because I used to try to read articles in the Sign magazine that Thomas Berry used to write. And to be honest, I hadn't a bull's notion what he was talking about. I'm not in notion, because he was a physicist, a scientist, a spiritual leader, but he was always talking about saving the planet. And he was the first one that I ever heard say that none of us can be healthy if the planet is sick. Now, it has taken us a while to see that, and now we have it. But even at that time, a lot of bishops and indeed men in Rome wanted him taken out of the way, because he was saying what they considered to be radical things, hugely radical things, linking in with other great theologians and scientists and physicists across the world. But I will say this, that the Passionist superiors at the time made a very brave decision. They funded him and allowed him to live outside the monastery and allowed him to complete his work, even though none of them knew what he was talking about. But Barnabas Ahern put it one time, a person who was talking to him, and he said, I don't know what Thomas is saying. Now, this is one of the greatest scripture scholars in the world, who was the personal scripture scholar to Pope Paul VI. And he said, I don't know what he's talking about, but Thomas is a good man, and he has a gem that will unfold itself eventually. And now, right across the world, everybody has taken Thomas Berry's work, this particularly after this pandemic that we're going through, and everybody is seeing that the kind of prophecy that Thomas Berry mentioned in those books that nobody understood has now found its time 70 years later, 50 years later. A book is something that changes the reader. It has already changed the author, and it has to do that. So, providentially, things can happen through a book that none of us knows the effect will be years down the road. I'm sure Thomas Aquinas hadn't a clue the effects that it would have out of the Summa that he was writing. And as you know, he himself decided not to write any more books. When he went before the Blessed Sacrament, he said, everything that I have read is as straw. And of course, we know now that it wasn't straw, but he thought that it was at that stage. So I really then went back to a book before I got round to reading Jim's over Easter time. I wanted to read another book of a man who died recently, Hans Kung. I've always found Hans Kung somebody that I can understand. I don't have to agree with everything he says. No. So he didn't agree with anything I said either, but that's neither here nor there. But Hans Kung was somebody who you could always understand. I think, you know, he was a brilliant communicator, and made you think because you could understand him. And he wrote a very incredible book near the end of his life called Can We Save the Catholic Church by Hans Kung. There are many insights in it. One of them is this, Jim, you'll be delighted to hear. One of them is this. He says, Catholicity in time and space is only meaningful if there is at the same time a concentration on the gospel. The gospel has to be the norm. Now, don't ever forget that brilliant short insight. And this is what Jim is exactly doing. The gospel is the norm. And the gospel can only be the norm if we allow it to change us. Otherwise, we have let the word fall on barren ground. And the wonderful book by Jim is precisely doing that. It was somebody that I heard one time speak and was very impressed by the kind of razzmatazz and flamboyancy, but wasn't all that impressed with much more. And that was the late great evangelist Billy Graham. But he did say something which I took in a scrapbook and have kept before me for years and years and years, and it is this. He said, "We are the Bibles the world is reading. We are the creeds the world is needing. And we are the sermons the world is heeding." And that's precisely it. In other words, you or I could very well be the only Bible that people meet. They could very well be the only presence of God that they will meet. And that's becoming more and more so in a continuously secular world. But, Christians have got to be the living word of Christ. And Jim's book is an extraordinary good way of beginning that journey. One of the things that we need to realize is that, and I think Jim has, I'm not sure if he says this specifically in his book, but I think it's the importance of the book, and it is this, that life-changing things can happen when we allow, or when we take Jesus out of the very convenient boxes we have permanently placed him in. If we can take the power of Jesus out of the boxes, that power will change the world. That power will not only change the world, it will do something even more important. It will transform the world. And it will transform those of us who read it. And Jim has taken the marginalized characters of the gospel, stories about people and incidents that no one bothered to write about before, much. He's imagined a whole lot of them. They might not have existed at all. But but it doesn't matter. They do exist because people like them existed in his book. And he has shown, that nobody in the life of Jesus is unimportant. Now, Jim has done that by the book. Could I say that to each of us tonight too? None of us in the life of Jesus, no matter what our role is unimportant. None of us is. And no event is unimportant. It's there for a reason. It's the inspired word of God. It's to give us inspiration and transformation and change within our lives. That's why it's there. And Jim, through this very prayerful book, this lovely book that he has done, because that's what's important about the book. It's a prayerful book. It's not just a razzmatazz flamboyancy that I talked about with Billy Graham. No, it's a book that has gone through his very soul. It's insightful, and the dialogues that he have are there. And it makes this extraordinarily important point, that once we have an encounter with Jesus, nobody can be the same ever again. I'll repeat that, because it's the essence of the book. Once we have an encounter with Jesus, we are changed for the better forever. But the sad thing is that most of us go through life without any encounter with Jesus. And that's the sad thing. And Jim, I think, is doing something wonderful here by giving us an opportunity in a simple way just to think around the gospel stories, to be allowed ourselves to let our own imagination, because I can assure you of this, Jim's imagination is wonderful, but if you let your imagination go, it'll be infinitely better, for you at least. So let your imagination go. Imaginative prayer is just something that we need to work about. One of the things that I liked, that's really what Kong is saying, is the gospel has to be the norm. That's what that is. Our imaginations will bring us into an encounter with Jesus, and once we have an encounter with Jesus, we can never ever be the same again. Nor will those around us be the same either. Karl Rahner once wrote a beautiful book about priesthood. In the middle of it it's a small pamphlet, but in the middle of it he has this lovely thing. He said, When we are with God in awe and in love, then and only then are we praying. Oh, what a gorgeous thing to say. When we are with God in awe and love, then and only then are we praying. He said, the number one cause of atheism is Christianity. No, excuse me, is Christians. Not Christianity. The number one cause of atheism is Christians. But then again, the number one cause of divorce is marriage. So what do you do with that? Those who proclaim him, Ranner says, with their mouths and deny him with their actions is what an unbelieving world finds unbelievable. That's a very key insight into it. He says faith is a gift, and therefore we can never dismiss somebody who hasn't got that gift, as we tend to do. Dismiss them terribly. In the years ahead, he said, Ranner, and this is the extraordinary thing. In the years ahead, I will either be a mystic, that is, one who has experienced God for real, or we will be nothing at all. And if we want to look around as why God has got a bad name in recent years, and in recent times, and increasingly so, I think there's the point of it. There's the point of it. We haven't experienced God as real. We're mouthing pious osities about God that are not real or couldn't be believable, and expecting people to believe them. Is it any wonder they don't believe us? We're not going to do that anymore. When we talk about God, it has to be about a God that's real. Story is at the heart of the Bible, always has been at the heart of the Bible. I remember John Shea, the great theologian of story, and went to a lecture of his on one occasion, and it was a phenomenal experience because he is a great storyteller himself, and he wraps you around his little stories, and you come out of them and you're ringing, and when you dry yourself out, you discover, holy God, that's a parable that I never thought of before. It's just brilliant. But this is what he said about story, and it's very true. He said, all stories are real. Some of them actually happened. Now, if you want to go to a pub in Ireland, you'll discover the truth of that. You'll find fellas telling stories that couldn't have happened, but the message of the story is real. All stories are true. Some of them actually happened. And this is what Jim is bringing out. Whether these are literal stories or not, or whether Jim's imagination is literal or not, doesn't matter. What's the truth? What's the truth of the story? What's the parable of the story? What's the meaning of the story? All stories are true. Some of them actually happened. And Jim has done this in a lovely way. He has 4 sections or chapters. Is it chapters you call them, or sections? I call them sections. They're more like sections than chapters. And in each section, being a strong biblical man, of course, he took the most mystical number in the Bible, number 7, and he tells 7 stories in each of the chapters. That's 28 lovely stories. 28 stories about fictional characters mainly. A great many of them are women too. So put that in your pipe and smoke it. The women were very popular in Jesus' time. There's a waiter who, I never thought of this before. You think about, how many gallons of wine did Jesus, how many gallons of water did Jesus want? And they were in the desert. Where did they get the water? Before it could be turned into wine. That's one of Jim's stories. Where did he get the water? The poor devil was carrying water all the time, not knowing what he was doing it for. And it was turned into wine. Then he knew what it was about. And sometimes that's what it is with life. We're carrying water that we don't know what it's about. But when it comes into contact with Jesus, it's transformed into something wonderful. And we are transformed with it. We learn about Rachel and Mary. They had a great part about the healing of the blind man at Bethsaida. The point is that not only was he cured did he get his sight restored, even more importantly, he got the gift of insight that didn't depend on sight or not. And that was a bigger miracle to him. The Samaritan woman, she was greedily downing water in the midday heat, not realizing that this was also water that was being turned into a living grace that would change her life. We talk and hear about real fishermen. What did they think about miraculous catches of fish in the middle of the night? What's the point of all of that? Listen to what the real fishermen say, and you'll see the point of all of that. And there is more than a hint that this rich young man that we talk about so often in the Bible, this rich young man, did he walk away? And many a sermon I heard about, there he is, he walked away and turned away from Jesus. How do you know? The point about it is, what we're after saying is this: can anybody come into an encounter with Jesus and see that look of love that Jim has and not be changed? It might take time for a change. There wasn't an instant conversion. But instant conversions can be instant flops as well. It's the one who thinks the journey, who loves the journey, who makes the journey. And Jim is making the point that that rich young man, because he encountered Jesus, had his life changed. And he went away sad, but I suspect he found joy when he allowed himself to find joy. Jim shows us then the qualities about a centurion that we might not have known. That deep faith, where did he get it? The greatest faith that Jesus experienced in all of his ministry was a person who shouldn't have had faith at all. And I was mentioning to Jim the other day that I think there's another centurion he should have written about too. A centurion, a Roman centurion, standing at the foot of the cross and was able, in the depths of defeat of the passion, was able to see, the only one that was able to see, it seems to us in the Gospels, to be able to say that the man hanging on the cross, the centurion said, truly this man is the Son of God. What an insight. Most beautiful words in the Passion narrative. It wasn't wasted. A soldier who helped to crucify him was able to say, gosh, truly this man was the Son of God. The power of grace when it gets a fertile piece of land to grow on. So finally, there are many ways in which we can use this invaluable book. It could be a prayer book, a real prayer book, not a mumbly-jumbly prayer book. It could be Lectio Divina, a help to that. Or it could just be something to kickstart your wonderful God-given imagination and let it flow and see where it takes you. It'd be beautiful if it did that. It demands, though, the one thing you cannot do with this book is read it. Because if you read it, you'll miss it. It has to be prayed with, reflected upon, allowed yourself to change you, allowed it to introduce you to the Word of God, which never returns empty-handed. Once it falls like the rain, as Isaiah says, just beautiful in its own way. We need consciously, and this is the big thing, we need consciously to open ourselves, not to stand back and convince me. That's never effective. We come humbly before God and say, Lord, I don't know, but help me. It's the prayer of the alcoholic, the prayer of the addict. I can't do it on my own. God, help me. And it's when that openness comes, God can squeeze in through, and the doors that we have are locked from the inside. But God can come through locked doors. But will we greet him when he comes through the locked door? That's the question Jim's book is asking us tonight. Cardinal Carlo Mattini, who was a scripture scholar himself, and I think he has a lovely summary that would have been a lovely summary of this book. He said, on one occasion, he said, the Vatican Council gave the scripture back to the Catholics, and he followed up with another word, another sentence, and this is it. He said, the word of God is simple and seeks out as its companion a heart that listens. Jim, that's the title for your follow-up book. A heart that listens. Write it down. As Roach used to say, it's a good one. Write it down. So, a look of love, witness to Jesus, is a special gift for us tonight, in this time, as we peek out of the pandemic. It will help us to guide us through these trying times. It's a roadmap we need at this time. It's a roadmap we're yearning for. This is a special night in the history of the church in Ireland. This is where the future is. The gospel must be the norm. A Look of Love does not claim to be an inspired book. I don't think it was anyway. But that doesn't mean it's not packed with inspiration. It is. And so I say, Jim, God has blessed us with this work from Jim Deeds. May God bless Jim Deeds and his family for his work. I hereby launch A Look of Love, Witnesses to Jesus by Jim Deeds from Redemptorist Publications, and I hope it outsells any book I ever wrote. Good night and thank you.
So thank you very much, Father Brian, for that wonderful launch of the book and your words and your sharing with us. And you said to us that it is a beautiful book and beautifully illustrated. But in what you said, you told us that it speaks something of the person, and there is something of the person in the writing, that these characters are brought to life, that the message is real. So we're going to listen to one of the stories from the book, and I'm going to invite a friend of Jim's, who happens to be a friend of mine, who happens to be from West Belfast. We stick together. Karen Collins is a wife to Justin, who is with us, and a mother to Ethan and Johnny, and is a very experienced lady in ministry to young people and in pastoral ministry with adults, and is currently studying for a master's in Christian theology with the Loyola Institute in Dublin. So I'm delighted that Karen is with us tonight, and she's going to read The Woman at the Well.
Thanks very much, Brendan. I'm delighted to be here this evening to read a story from Jim's book. Have you ever returned to a place where something wonderful happened to you and found yourself savouring the memory of it all over again? In this excerpt from Jim's book, we meet a woman who does just that. She is the Samaritan woman who encountered Jesus at the well in the heat of the midday sun. After I read this story, there will be some questions for personal reflection, which we'll take a few moments with. But for just a short moment before we begin, I invite you to bring that familiar gospel story into your own mind, and just to savour the memory of what that story has meant to you over the years. And we just take a moment to think about that. She sat by the well and lifted the cup of water to her lips, drinking greedily, its coolness saving her from the baking midday heat. She came here every day at midday. She had done so ever since the day she encountered living water at the well. Jesus of Nazareth, the Son of God, the Messiah. Although when she first met him, she didn't know who he was. She just saw a young Jewish man who she thought would ignore her. But then when he spoke to her and she saw a glint of joy in his eye, she thought she might have a little fun joking with him. She closed her eyes now, satisfied from the drink of water. She recounted the scene again in the quietness of her own heart and the eye of her imagination. She could see the smile in his eyes as he told her that he was offering her living water. She remembered her confusion at hearing this phrase and teasing him about him having no bucket with which to draw this living water. And then she could see in her mind the change that came over his face. His smile disappeared, and he looked at her with a look that can only be described as love. Whoever drinks the water I shall give will never be thirsty again. She opened her eyes and took another drink of cold water. Never to be thirsty again. How amazing never to thirst again for water, for love. She knew when she had heard Jesus say those words that he was not only speaking of water, for surely he went on to tell her he knew the intricacies of her private life and the story of her having 5 husbands. No one ever spoke to her face to face about this. There were whispers, though. She heard them and they hurt. But that day, Jesus spoke to her face. He did not whisper, he did not gossip, and he did not condemn. And she was captivated. Her heart opened in that moment, and it has been open ever since. She stood preparing to go, and as she did, she recalled how Jesus had told her that he was the promised one, the Messiah. He said it quite simply, I am he. 3 words that changed her forever. I am he. He said it with no airs or graces, nor with any force whatsoever, except for the force of truth and love. She had looked at him in that moment and saw that it was true. Just as he had said it, his friends approached. She hadn't wanted to let him leave, and she had hurried back to her town centre and declared, I think I have found the Messiah. The people initially laughed at her. But as she ran back to Jesus, some followed her. They were caught up in her excitement. Standing at the well now, these years later, she still felt that excitement. She recalled the 2 days that Jesus and his friends stayed with them in their town. The music, the laughter, the healings, the words from Jesus' lips. He had told her that the people of the world were like a great field ready for the harvest, and that she should tell the story of their encounter to all she met. She promised she would. Setting off now from the well, she felt blessed that she had kept that promise. Many had come to know Jesus through her. Her back to the well, she walked back to her town, ready, just in case she met anyone on the road, to tell them about the wonder of encounters at Jacob's well in the heat of the midday sun. So I invite you just to take a moment just to reflect back on that story and just anything within it that you identified with. The tagline of Jim's book is Witness to Jesus. And we just think of that as we listen to the next question. How might God be calling you to share the story of your encounter with God? Jesus engaged this woman in conversation. What would you want to say and to hear from God today?
So thank you very much, Karen, for that lovely reading and reflection. Many of you here this evening will know Jim or have come across Jim or have worked with Jim. And if you went outside and you say, "Do you know Jim Deeds?" Somebody say, "Well, yeah, where's he from?" And they say, "Well, he's from up the road," whatever. But I imagine if you went up the Andersonstown Road, near where Jim lives, and you say, "Excuse me, do you know Jim Deeds?" They say, No. They say, "But do you know a man that walks up and down the road who has massive dogs?" They'll all go, "Yes, I do know him." And Jim is often seen walking down and up and down the Andersonstown Road with his very big dogs and not so big dogs. And we know that as he is out walking, he encounters the people that he meets along the way, and many of those people have been the inspiration for his writings and his reflections, not only in this book, but in his sharings on social media. So we're going to invite Jim to come forward and to share a little bit with us this evening, and to give him an opportunity to say a few words to us. So I'm going to invite Jim to come forward. So I'll give you the space at the front.
Thank you.
In Belfast here we have this saying, and I might say it in other places too, that somebody has a look about him. When you're talking about somebody, see him there, he has a look about him. And I was thinking about that when I've been reading the book over the last week or so, and particularly the title, A Look of Love. And if we were describing Jesus, you'd say, he has a look about him, and it's a look of love. And you've introduced us to a whole host of characters and people in this book who encountered that look and that look of love. Maybe you could share with us a little bit about how you entered into this time of reflection that led to a look of love.
Sure. First of all, thank you. My goodness, good to see everybody here. Father Peter, thank you on behalf of everybody here in Clonard who've been so good. Bishop Noel, Bishop Allen, and all of you. Thanks everybody for turning up. But more thanks later on, so I'll not spoil that. Brendan asked me earlier on, how do these come to you? The reality is they don't come easy to me. This book's about 4 years in the making, since I wrote the first one of the stories. I think there was a story about Simon of Cyrene, who's always been a figure who interests me. So they don't come easy, but they come about through curiosity. Hi, John. Through curiosity with those characters. When I went to secondary school, I went to St Mary's up in the Glen Road, and in first year they gave me a wee red New Testament. Did you get one of them when you went to school? New Testament and Psalms, and this was the first kind of mini sort of Bible that I had. And I remember reading it, and I read it, and I read it, and I read it. And I think at that stage in my life, I read it so much it nearly fell apart. Under the guidance of my mum, she told me how to read it and what to do. So I kind of had that interest, that grounding in certainly in the New Testament anyhow. And I was always curious about Jesus. Now, listen, my life wandered off, as my family know. I wasn't eating the Bible for my whole life. But certainly this last 10 years or so, slightly more of working in and around the diocese, I've had the chance to really be with many groups and pray with Scripture, and to see it as something more than just words on a page. And then as I did that, and as I prayed the kind of contemplative prayer that Brendan McManus and I would do around the country with people, I began to notice characters, and they're always the characters on the edge. They're the ones that I was always drawn to. I think growing up in West Belfast in the 70s, you kind of felt on the edge a bit. So I feel I'm more aligned to people on the edge, I think. And so I went there, and I went with an open mind to see who I would find. And when I thought about those characters, I noticed they were, like there's one woman in the Mark's Gospel, and she gets 2 words, and one of them is and Susanna. Do you know who Susanna is? I had no idea who Susanna was. Susanna is one of the 3 women who bankrolled Jesus' whole ministry, who took care of him, got his money, fed him, and made the whole thing happen. And she got 2 words. It's 2 more than we got, Brendan. So there's a story in the book called Merit Mention. And I was curious, what would you do that would merit mention at all? But I also remembered that these were the lost women. We all know who the men were. So go on, if you get the book, look up the little bit called Merit Mention, and give and Susanna a little bit of time and see what she teaches you.
Of all the, like you recall there getting that little Bible in first year in school, and I have that memory as well, and putting it in your blazer pocket, and the stories were close to your heart, I suppose, in that action, and then in later life, are reading them and reflecting upon them, and particularly over the last number of years. Is there a person or a character in the gospel stories that you have as a favourite, or somebody, you mentioned Simon there, but is there a story that really sits with you, and a story that...
There's a few. It's like asking me which of my beautiful children that I love more, so that I don't love them any more than each other. But there are different ones come to the front of my mind. There's a little story in the book called Breathed, which was about the gospel, certainly our gospel, past Sunday from John 20. Jesus appearing in the room and saying, "Peace be with you," and breathing on them. So the stories, rather than characters, it's a story like that often gives me comfort, because Jesus appeared into their fear and their mess and everything that was wrong, and said, "Peace be with you, and here I am." And he breathed on them. And I always think that's a weird thing. How many people in your life have you ever breathed on? Particularly now. The reality, the only people you ever breathe on are people that you love deeply and with whom you are intimate. In a hug, in an embrace. Jesus breathed on them. You know, how close was he to them at that moment? So that's one that's in my mind now. But the last story in the book is from the last bit of John's Gospel, John 21, and it's where Jesus is around the fire by the Sea of Galilee. And when he's in that moment with Peter. And Peter, who messed up, Peter, who denied him and ran away and was just a bit of an idiot. If you read, Peter was always second. His first shot was always wrong, and somebody had to correct him, or Jesus had to correct him. Do you know that John in the Gospel got to the tomb first before Peter? Peter was always second, and yet in that moment round the fire, Jesus completely forgives him, redeems him, and missions him, tells him, go and feed my sheep and feed my lambs, and do you love me? And do you love me? And Peter, who had run away, he was uppity and said, of course you know, and he got annoyed at Jesus for asking the question. But even with all of those faults, Jesus loved them. So those are two that are with me now, but it kind of depends on different days. I remember these things.
Sure. When you were sharing with us there and talking about particularly over the last 10 years or so, and in your work in the ministry and the people and the groups that you have been meeting, and how that has led you to write the book A Look of Love, and the books with Brenda McManus and so on. Looking into the future, do you have a hope for the future, particularly in the context of church and ministry and people and the people of God for this part of the world?
Oh, you shouldn't have asked me that. Okay, we're out by midnight, is that all right? No, I'll not go too far. I have hopes for this book. I hope this book leads people to know Jesus a bit more. And I hope they know they're held in a look of love and not in a diagnostic stare. Right? You know a diagnostic stare, where you look at someone and you think, what's wrong with them? What have they done wrong? And how can I fix you to be more like the way I want you to be? So the hope for me is the book that you know that you're held in a look of love and not a diagnostic stare, and that each of my stories, there'll be a reference to the gospel. My stories are real. They're not necessarily true. But the gospel reference is there, and that's true. Go and read that. So that's the hope. As we sit or stand here, we're only a couple of 100 yards from where a few days ago people did not hold each other in a look of love. They held each other in their sights. Remember that we had the rioting here, not so far from here. And they were us. You know, they were some of us. They were the people of this place. Me and you, they're part of us. And they did not hold each other in a look of love. And we often don't do that. So my greatest hope is that when you leave here in this physical church, or when you leave here as part of the digital church, that not only will you have several copies of the book, but that you will redouble, and we will redouble our efforts to bring peace and reconciliation between all the people here, and that we would hold each other in a look of love. Because Jesus said again in John's Gospel, I have given you an example. And remember, that was washing their feet and serving them and loving them. I have given you an example, and I want you to go and do the same. So that's my hope for this place, that in whatever way we do that, Bishop Noel and other clergymen and women came together during the week here in North Belfast and walked between the supposed different parts of our one community, it's not different communities, that each of us would do what we can do to bring that look of love to bear in the world. Thanks very much, Jim. And just to say to you, congratulations on this. And it is as Brian described it, a beautiful book that is not just a book that you should read. And as Karen very ably showed to us, that it's a prayer or a book which we can pray with and reflect with and so on. So we just say congratulations, and we hope that many people will take it and use it and use it and use it again. I know in the ministry that I'm involved in and work in with young people, it's something that we try to do about bringing the gospel to life and bringing the people in the gospel to life. And I think you've really done that in a wonderful way. So well done and congratulations. There's a few people I just want to say some thanks. Okay, so take it away. I'm just going to say a few thanks. It's a measure, I think it's a measure of having a blessed life, that you're worried you might not remember everybody that you're grateful for. And I have a very blessed life, and I will not remember everybody, so if I forget people, I apologize. I will forget people. So I'm not going to try and thank everybody. I'm going to thank my family for bearing with me for all of these years. I want to dedicate the book to my mum and dad, who are watching as part of the digital church. I want to thank the amazing work done by Claire Carmichael. Where is she? She's always at the back. She's never at the front, and she likes it that way, and that is her playground, and she does amazingly well. Claire does Trojan amazing work. I am blessed to know Paula McKeown and Claire Carmichael and women like that who are just, you have to meet these people and just see how they work. So Claire, thank you. Ryan, wherever Ryan is, God bless him. Just ordained a deacon recently. Thank you. Brendan McConvry, some of you will not know of whom we speak. Father Brendan McConvry. Father Brendan's father and my granda were buddies. They hung about together. Part of the confraternity in St. Peter's CYMS and different things. There would be no book, this book wouldn't happen without Father Brendan. First of all, saying, yeah, go ahead, and then telling me, no, I want more, and sent the chapter back and saying, no, that's not good enough. I know you've got more in you. And thank God on those occasions he was right. So Father Brendan, this would not have happened without you. Thank you so much. David, who designed the book, it's just a beautiful thing. Go and check it out. David's a genius as well. Paula, I have already name-checked. Paula, the director of the Living Church office in the Down and Connor Diocese, wrote the foreword and wrote it really, really well. She's a very gifted writer in her own right. And then the people who have taken part, everybody who's taken part this evening. And do you ever get one of your heroes to say stuff about you? So when I was sitting there and Brian Darcy was talking about me, I was just, oh my goodness. So Father Brian, thank you for what you said, how you said it, and just thank you for who you are. We need you. We need more of you, thank God. And then, for those of you who I forgot, I apologise. And for everybody who's here, my friends, my family, my friends and colleagues, my Four Corners people, buddies as well, and people who supply me wood for making crosses, and whoever, for whatever reason that you're here, thank you so much for being here. God bless.
Thanks very much, Jim. So we are almost at the end, but I'm going to invite Brother Ryan, who Jim mentioned there, who is a member of the community here in Clonard, but also part of the Redemptorist Communications team, just to say a few words of thanks.
Very good evening, everybody, and thank you, Jim, for doing my job. So it's on my job to thank everybody on behalf of Redemptorist Communications. There are so many people involved in just releasing one book, and so I'm going to go through a few people's names. Jim did a few of them for me, so I'll shorten their thanks. First of all, I would like to thank you, Jim, for your yes, for saying yes to Father Brendan after 4 years to finish the book, and for getting it out there. I think, like everybody who has stood here has said, it is a great book to sit and allow your imagination to come alive. So thank you for that, and for taking the time, especially during lockdown, to do that. So we thank you as well for your work here in the Diocese of Down and Connor, your work with Living Church and beyond. I would like to especially thank the family. I think, Jim is the author of the book, but it's the family that supports him and the family that are there with him while he writes it, and I'm sure give him that inspiration and allow the imagination to come alive. So to Nuala, his wife, to Joe, Brendan, and Emer, thank you so much for allowing your father to write this book so that he can share it with all of us, and for supporting him through, I'm sure, the many years of having to listen to the stories over and over and over again. We have mentioned Father Brendan McConvry many times, so excuse me for not looking at you, because I'm going to look at you, Brendan. Father Brendan, thank you. Thank you for your dedication and your work as our editor here at Redemptorist Communications. Brendan, every time I've seen him in the last few months, has talked about this book and is very proud of this book. So we thank you, Brendan, for the work that you put in and making this book possible. I mentioned Father David McNamara as well, who is in our Limerick community. The book is very good, the content, but the imagery is amazing. So when you look at and buy the book, the images inside this book they bring the story alive. So it helps when reflecting on the different stories to look at the imagery, because Father David put in amazing work to bring it alive. To Trina Doherty. Trina is our proofreader. She works with Redemptorist Communications, with the magazines and books, but she worked especially on this book. Trina has a great eye for details, so we thank her for that. To W&G Bird Printers, the people who produced and printed the book, we would like to thank them. They do a lot of our work as well. And in a special way, we thank Don. I think Don is somewhere around here. But we thank you, Don, for your commitment and your dedication and your professional service that you give to Redemptorist Communications. I know Claire often mentions you, and I know whenever she phones you, within the next day or a few days, you have the product there. So we thank you for that and for all the work that you do. To Paula. So Paula is the director of the Living Church, and I also believe a co-worker of Jim's, but also your boss. Yeah, so we thank you, Paula, for the beautiful foreword that you wrote. I won't spoil it for you, but she invites us to allow our imaginations to come alive, and especially to allow the Holy Spirit to be at work. So we thank you for that, and I won't say any more because there's a lot of other beautiful things she said, but thank you for your dedication and your work as well within the diocese in the Living Church. Father Brian, thank you. Thank you for coming and being with us here in Clonard, coming all the way from Crossgar tonight. We really appreciate your words and your sense of humor, and your dedication is very much appreciated, and we really, I learned a lot tonight from just what you said and shared with all of us, so we're thankful for that. But I learned one thing tonight, or before tonight. I won't drop any names of the newspaper I read it from, but you obtained an OBE recently, or in the last year. I mention this because of what Jim just mentioned about the work that we do here in Clonard, and especially this area with the Troubles, and in recent times with the cross-community relations, and that's why you got the OBE. So we thank you for that work especially. It's so important today that there are voices and people that are able to talk to each other, and I think, Father Brian, you have that gift. So please continue using that gift of speech to be able to talk with each other. In the article, I read that when you met the Duke of Cambridge, you said to him that you will pray for his family. So I think in recent times, those prayers are going to be even more important for him and his family. And we pray for all those who have died, especially in these days during the pandemic. So keep praying for them, for all of us here, as we promise to pray for you. So thank you for being that voice for the people on the margins. And I think having you launch the book is very appropriate for that. So thank you, Father Brian. To Karen, you read the book so beautifully, and that chapter on the woman at the well. I'm a person that loves to listen to audiobooks when I'm out walking, or back in the day when I could go to the gym. And I think you have a career in audiobook reading, so thank you for that and for sharing that. I know as a friend of Jim and a friend of Clonard's and Brendan and so many people, thank you for sharing that gift with us tonight. I thank Brendan Deneen, who is our Master of Ceremony tonight, for the great work and keeping us awake. So we thank Brendan for that and his commitment, especially here to the community and your youth ministry as Director of Youth Ministry in Clonard. So thank you for all that you do, Brendan, and your enthusiasm and your yes that you say constantly. I thank the youth ministry team. If you look behind you, they are standing right there. So we thank the young people and the not so young for coming out and guiding us to our seats and in the car park. So thank you for your dedication as young people here in Clonard. We thank the volunteers. We thank Gail Deneen, who is selling the book at the back. We thank Jared Curley, who is taking the photos for, I'm sure once they come out, a lot of beautiful photos that have been taken this evening. I'd thank in a special way Father Peter Burns as the rector here in Clonard, and to the community here for opening their doors to all of us and allowing this event to take place. So thank you to them and the community. To Tommy and Joe from our church ministry team, I thank them for preparing the church and, once we leave, for sanitizing the church and keeping it safe, and for all the work that they do. I know Jim has done this already, and I would like to do it as well. I thank Claire Carmichael, who is sitting at the back of the church, for all her work. This event wouldn't have taken place without Claire, so we thank Claire for that dedication and that commitment that you have for Redemptorist Communications and for the Redemptorist family. All your work and your dedication is very much appreciated, and we thank you and we pray for you in your ministry, Claire. And finally, I thank all of you here gathered and those who are online. Thank you for being part of this. On behalf of Redemptorist Communications and all of us in the Redemptorist family, thank you. Thank you for your support, especially during these pandemic times, but always your support is very much appreciated. Just one last thing I want to remind you, if you would like to purchase the book. Gail is sitting at the back. I don't know if when you came in she was there, but on your way out, you're welcome to purchase the book. The young people will help you to line up so that you're safely distant, and you can purchase the book. And there's a treat. All the books that you purchase here tonight have been signed by Jim. So there are 300 books available, all signed by Jim, so purchase as many as you would like. Again, Brendan will go through the procedures at the end. Now I invite Claire to come up because, okay, we have gifts. So I'm going to put my mask on and I'm going to ask, as I do the gifts, for the people to come up. So first of all, to Jim. So thank you, Jim. I hope you share it with your family. Father Brian. And next, I invite Nuala. The next person is Karen, because she's sitting right here. And Paula. And finally, Brendan Deneen as our MC. So we thank you once again, everybody, and I hand back to Brendan as he concludes our evening.
Very good. Good stuff. I actually heard a wee clink of a bottle. I says, I hope I'm getting one of those. We're going to conclude our evening. Before we do, the book is available, as mentioned, at what we know here in Clonard as the Shrine of St. Alphonsus, which is down in the far corner here. And we have a one-way system here in the church for social distancing purposes. So if you wish to purchase the book, go down the centre aisle, then come up by the side aisle, across the aisle, and the exit of the church this evening for everyone is over on this side of the church. We ask you, if you are exiting, that you try to maintain good social distancing, and we ask you not to congregate in the car park of the church. It is very, very tempting in an event like this, and maybe people that you haven't seen for a while that you fancy a wee chat. Well, you'll have to do that online. So Please exit by this way. You'll have your hands sanitized again on the way out. So if you want to purchase the book, down the centre aisle, across, back out this way. We're going to conclude with Jim, with his friend Brenda McManus, who are going to sing for us Amazing Grace. You are welcome to listen, and if you're going to church these days, you know that we do not join in. We do not have congregational singing, so we ask you not to join in the song. Again, thank you very much, everyone, for coming this evening. We hope that you are able to get a copy of the book and to enjoy it, and we hope to see you back here in Clonard sometime in the future. So good night, God bless, and stay safe. Thank you.
So it's never done without a song, like it's just never done without a song. And you can't sing, but I mean, there's no air transfer in claps, is there? So, Amen.